He told me it was an emergency server crisis on our 10-year anniversary. A lie. He was at a 5-star hotel checking in with her. He thought he was smart. He didn't realize I had a surprise for him, too. I sent our 6-year-old son to visit Dad. His face, I heard, was unforgettable. My name is Eliza. At 38, I was a vice president at DataWeave Solutions, one of Denver's top data analytics firms. I had the polished career, the tastefully renovated Victorian near Cheeseman Park, the perfect husband, and a bright, beautiful 6-year-old son named Leo. I had, by every metric I'd ever measured, one, Marcus, my husband, was the ballast to my ambition. He was a brilliant IT architect, steady and calm where I was driven and restless. He was the man who made my coffee every morning and the father who never missed a bedtime story. We were a team. It was our 10th anniversary. A decade. I woke up expecting champagne flutes on the bedside table or a note taped to the mirror. Instead, I found Marcus already dressed, knotting his tie with frantic energy. He had forgotten. In 10 years, Marcus had never forgotten so much as a dinner reservation. But our anniversary, a milestone carved into the granite of our lives, had slipped his mind. He didn't even meet my eyes. He mumbled something about an emergency server crisis, a catastrophic failure at a client's site in Boulder. He had to go. Immediately. The disappointment was a sharp, physical ache, but I swallowed it. I was the understanding wife, the partner. Of course, I said, forcing a smile. Save the day. We'll celebrate tonight. He kissed my forehead, a brief, cool press of lips, and was gone. I tried to salvage the day. I took Leo to Washington Park. The sun was bright, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. We fed the ducks, and I pushed him on the swings, the sound of his laughter almost convincing me that the hollowness in my chest was just hunger. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I smiled, assuming it was a happy anniversary text from my best friend, Chloe. It was from Chloe, but it wasn't a congratulation. It was a picture. The timestamp was from 20 minutes ago. The location tag wasn't Boulder. It was downtown Denver, at the valet stand of the Ethelred, the most exclusive 5-star hotel in the city. The man in the photo, handing his keys to a valet, was Marcus. His posture was confident, not stressed. He was wearing the expensive watch I'd bought him for his birthday, the one he saved for special occasions. And beside him stood a woman. She was not me. It was, unmistakably, Serafina Vance, the rising star city councilwoman, the one whose face was plastered on billboards, championing family values and community integrity. I knew instantly, with the same cold certainty that I used to analyze a data set, exactly who she was. And I knew who she was married to Senator Grant, a political operator so powerful and so ruthless he made tectonic plates shift just by entering a room. The world didn't blur. I didn't cry. The first thing I felt was not the heat of betrayal, but an arctic chill that started in my fingertips and spiderwebbed straight to my heart. This wasn't a messy, pathetic affair. This was something bigger. This was something dangerous. This was an alliance. I watched Leo race toward the slide, oblivious, his small form a beacon of light in the sudden darkness that had consumed my world. I turned my back to the playground, my movements precise, economical. I pulled up Chloe's name and pressed call. My voice, when I spoke, was perfectly level, devoid of any emotion at all. It was the voice I used to close million-dollar deals. Follow them, I said, no preamble. Hire whoever you need. I want to know where they go, who they meet, what they order for lunch. I want everything. The photo burned in my hand, a digital ghost of a life I thought I knew. 10 years. A perfect, polished decade. I met Marcus at a tech gala I was attending only to network. I was all sharp angles and ambition. He was the calm center of the room, a man who listened more than he spoke. He was an IT architect, solid and dependable, and he became my anchor. He was the one who celebrated my promotions harder than I did, who brought me takeout at midnight when I was buried in a project, and who insisted my name came first on our holiday cards. He was the quiet strength that allowed my ambition to flourish. And then came Leo. Marcus was a natural father. He was the parent who had infinite patience for building block towers, the one who read Where the Wild Things Are with all the right voices, the one whose shoulders Leo always rode on. Our life was a well-running algorithm, predictable and secure. At the head of this perfect life sat Arthur, Marcus's father. Judge Arthur Rollins, retired. He was a man carved from a different era, a figure of quiet dignity and unshakable integrity. He was, in every sense, the moral compass of our family. From the moment Marcus brought me home, Arthur had treated me not just as a daughter-in-law, but as an equal. He loved my mind, my drive. In the small, harmless arguments Marcus and I would have, Arthur invariably took my side. "You're lucky to have her son," he'd say, his voice a low rumble of authority. "She's the best decision you ever made." My memories of him are steeped in the scent of old books and the warm glow of the fireplace in his study. I see him on the floor with Leo, patiently explaining the movement of a chess piece, his large, veined hand dwarfing his grandson's. He was the wisdom, the safety, the absolute certainty of our world. I remembered, with a sudden, sickening jolt, the promotion I'd turned down. It was 2 years ago, a massive opportunity in Seattle. Head of the entire West Coast division for a competitor. It was the dream job. I had agonized over it for weeks. Marcus had been supportive but hesitant. "We'd make it work. Liza," he'd said, "but what about Leo and my dad?" It was Arthur who had sealed the deal. He'd sat me down in that study, a glass of bourbon in his hand. "Eliza," he said, "a career is a wonderful thing, but a foundation, a true family, that is the only thing that endures. Nothing is more important than what you are building here, in this house, in Denver." I turned the job down. I chose them. I chose this life, and I had meant it. That sacrifice, I had told myself, wasn't a sacrifice at all. It was an investment in the only thing that mattered. It was a trade for a foundation I believed was as solid as granite. I thought of Arthur's hand on my shoulder just last month at a family barbecue. He'd been watching me manage the grill, mediate a spat between cousins, and comfort Leo over a scraped knee, all at once. He smiled. That wise, kind smile. "You're the glue, Eliza," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're the glue that holds all of this together. The glue, the foundation, the anchor. All of it was a lie." I looked at the picture on my phone again. Marcus, smiling at that woman, at the entrance to that hotel. The warmth of the past 10 years evaporated, leaving only the Arctic cold of the present. The granite foundation had just cracked, and I was staring into the abyss. I stood by the duck pond, the bright Colorado sun feeling like a spotlight, but my mind was in the dark, running regressions on a failed hypothesis. My marriage. As a data analyst, I am trained to find the signal in the noise. For 6 months, I had been living in the noise, willfully ignoring the signal. Now, with the cold clarity of that photograph, I started the playback. My shock wasn't emotional. Not yet. It was analytical. I was a detective walking back through a crime scene, finally realizing all the clues I had stepped over. It began half a year ago. The midnight system upgrades. Marcus, my steady, 9-to-5 husband, suddenly became the indispensable man for a crisis that only seemed to happen at 2 in the morning, or 3 in the morning. "It's a new enterprise client. Liza," he'd said, rubbing his eyes for effect. "Their security protocols are archaic. I'm the only one who can oversee the data migration. It's temporary, I promise." His exhaustion seemed so plausible. I'd made him coffee and told him to be safe. Then came the phone. For 10 years, Our phones were communal property. Leo used his to play games. I used it to add items to the grocery list. One evening, I picked it up to look up a recipe. My thumbprint didn't work. A 6-digit passcode screen stared back at me. "Oh," he'd said, taking it from my hand just a little too quickly. "New client security protocols. They're forcing compliance on all personal devices that access the network. It's a total pain." He'd typed in the code and handed it back, but the message was clear: the device was no longer open. The excuses, I realized, always revolved around clients and security. They were the perfect, unverifiable lies to tell a woman in the same industry. His interests shifted. Suddenly, my apolitical husband developed a passionate interest in Denver city planning. He started attending civic fundraisers, events he had always described as root canals in tuxedos. I'd gone to the first one with him, bored out of my mind. Serafina Vance had been the keynote speaker, radiating charisma. I'd complained about the bad Chardonnay and the glad handing. "You go next time," I'd told him. "Mingle for the both of us." And he did. He went, again and again, always alone. The emotional distance was the most subtle, insidious change. He blamed it on the stress of the new projects. He was tired. He was preoccupied. When he rolled away from me in bed, his back a rigid wall between us. I'd told myself to be patient. I told myself I was being the supportive partner, the one who understood the pressures of a high-stakes career. I'd mistaken infidelity for ambition. But the final clue, the one that made my stomach drop right there in the park, was the scent. He'd come home late from one of those fundraisers about a month ago. I was already in bed, half asleep. He leaned in to kiss my forehead, a perfunctory gesture. He didn't smell of wine or the clean scent of his own soap. He smelled of smoke. It wasn't the acrid smell of a cigarette. It was the rich, almost sweet aroma of very expensive cigars. "Since when do you smoke?" I'd mumbled into the pillow. He chuckled, a hollow sound. God, no. I was trapped in a back room with some political donors. Had to play the game. You know how it is? I did know. I knew, from countless newspaper profiles, that Senator Grant, Serafina's powerful, ruthless husband, was famous for exactly that brand of cigar. I had dismissed it at the time, imagining my Marcus trying to network, holding his breath in a room full of blowhards. I saw it now. He wasn't just playing the game. He was a player. He hadn't been trapped in a room with them. He had been invited into it, breathing their air, sharing their secrets, and, apparently, sharing their wives. These weren't small, isolated lies. They were a carefully constructed firewall, built one lie at a time, designed to keep me out while he built an entirely new life just on the other side. My mind, the analytical engine I trusted above all else, was now a liability. It was replaying every interaction, every dismissed data point, searching for the root error. It found it 3 months ago, the largest, most blatant clue I had ever ignored. I had been monitoring our joint account, as I always did, preparing our finances for the quarterly tax estimates. A single line item caught my eye. A wire transfer. $15,000. I tracked Marcus down in the kitchen, where he was helping Leo with a model airplane. "Hey," I'd said, trying to sound casual. "What was the $15,000 transfer for on Tuesday?" He didn't even pause in gluing a wing. "Oh, that. It's a donation." "A donation?" "Yeah, to Serafina Vance's re-election campaign." He finally looked up, flashing that easy, disarming smile. "It's good for business. Liza, good for the company's profile. Networking. You know how it is." And the worst part I did know, or I thought I did, it was the world we lived in. I was in the final push of a massive platform launch for DataWeave, sleeping maybe 5 hours a night. The launch was my baby, consuming every spare neurological pathway. I was too busy, too stressed, and frankly, too trusting. I nodded, checked the mental box, and let it go. It was just business. The launch was a huge success. The following week, I finally had a day to breathe, to restore the baseline order of our home. I was tidying Marcus's home office, a room I rarely entered. He called it his command center. I called it organized chaos. I was collecting a stack of invoices and tech journals to recycle when a piece of heavy, cream-colored cardstock slipped out from between a server manual and an old catering menu. It wasn't an invoice. It was a receipt. It was from a private jeweler in Cherry Creek, the kind of place that doesn't have prices on display, the kind of place I found obnoxious. The date on the receipt was the exact same day as the campaign donation. The amount charged was identical. $15,000. I felt a sudden, cold stillness in the room. My eyes scanned the description of the item, the words seeming to float off the page. 1, it read, custom diamond tennis bracelet. My blood ran cold. I stood there, the heavy paper in my hand, trying to make the equation balance. Why would there be two identical charges for $15,000 on the exact same day, one for a political donation, one for a diamond bracelet? It didn't compute. It was a logical impossibility. My mind raced, trying to find a benign explanation. Had the jeweler made a catastrophic billing error? Did Marcus use the jeweler as a bizarre intermediary to make the donation? Had he bought a bracelet, seen the charge, and then the bank made a duplicate error? I was the VP of DataWeave Solutions. My entire career was built on seeing the pattern, on understanding that there are no true anomalies, only data points you haven't explained yet. This was an outlier that skewed the entire graph of my marriage, and I did nothing. I stood in his quiet, sunlit office and felt a wave of anxiety so profound it was almost paralyzing. And then, I did the one thing I had never done with data I didn't understand. I willfully ignored it. I folded the receipt and slipped it back precisely where I found it, between the manual and the menu. I walked out of the room. I told myself it was a bank error, a mistake. I chose to believe in the integrity of the system, in the stability of the life we had built. Now, sitting in my car in the driveway, the engine silent, I finally saw the truth. It was never a paradox. It was an accounting trick. One charge was the lie, the public-facing story. The other was the reality. The $15,000 donation wasn't good for business. It was the alibi. It was the cover story for a $15,000 gift to another man's wife. I couldn't reconcile the data. I spent 2 days trying to find a bank error, a third-party billing mistake, anything. I found nothing. The anomaly sat in my brain, a piece of code that wouldn't compile, breaking everything. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't look at Marcus without feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. So I did what I always did when I was truly lost. I went to the one person I trusted implicitly, the man who had been my North Star for a decade. I went to Arthur. I found him in his study, the room that always smelled of leather bindings, old paper, and a faint hint of bourbon. He was reading, a pair of glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when I entered, his smile immediate and warm. "Eliza, what a wonderful surprise. Is Marcus with you?" "No, Arthur, I needed to talk to you. Alone." His smile faded into a look of fatherly concern. He put his book down and gestured to the leather chair opposite his desk. "Of course. What's wrong?" I laid it all out, not as an accusation, but as a problem I couldn't solve. I explained the $15,000 donation. I explained finding the receipt from the jeweler for the exact same amount, on the exact same day, for a custom diamond bracelet. I explained my confusion, my worry about a bank error, my fear that something strange was happening. He listened without interrupting, his judicial mask firmly in place. When I finished, he didn't speak for a long moment. He leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. He let out a long, heavy sigh, the sound of a man burdened with disappointing knowledge. "Eliza," he began, his voice laced with a profound, weary sympathy. "My dear girl, you are a wonderful woman, brilliant, driven, but in some ways, you are beautifully naive." I bristled, but he held up a hand. "I mean that as a compliment. You see the world in black and white, in right and wrong. I'm afraid I've spent a lifetime in the gray." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "Marcus is a good man," he said, "but he is weak. He wants to play in a league he isn't built for." He continued, his voice dropping to a confidential, almost conspiratorial tone. "This world, the world of men like Senator Grant, the world Serafina Vance lives in, business isn't done with handshakes. Eliza, it's done with favors. It's done with gifts." He laid out the logic for me, as if explaining a complex legal precedent. "The $15,000 donation," he scoffed gently. "That's the public record. That's the receipt you're meant to see. It's clean." He pointed a finger at the empty air where my evidence should be. "The bracelet. That is the real currency. That's a private thank you. Probably for some business partner's wife. A gatekeeper to a contract Marcus is trying to land. It's how these things are done. It's distasteful, yes, but it is the game." I just stared, my mind reeling. He reached across the desk and put his large, warm hand over mine. "Eliza, this is what's important. You cannot, under any circumstances, confront Marcus about this." "What but—" "No." His voice was firm, the gavel falling. "You will only accomplish two things. You will mortify him, revealing that you've been digging through his things, and more importantly, you will show him that you don't understand the game he is trying to play to provide for this family. You will make him feel foolish, and you will make yourself look naive. It will drive a wedge between you that will never heal." The twist was agonizing. He was right. I wasn't angry at Marcus. I was embarrassed for him, and I was ashamed of myself. The VP of DataWeave, was the naive one. I was the small-town wife who didn't understand how the world of power really worked. My suspicions felt petty. My snooping felt cheap. Tears of shame, not betrayal, pricked my eyes. "Oh, Arthur, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it that way." He smiled, that wise, kind smile I trusted so much. He squeezed my hand. "Of course you didn't. That's why you're the good one in the family." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "Don't you worry your head about this another minute. I'm always here for you, Eliza. Family first, always." I walked out of that study feeling a profound sense of relief. The anomaly was explained. The fire was out. Arthur's wisdom had, once again, restored my world to order. Arthur's wisdom was supposed to be a reassurance, a final word on the matter. It should have settled my mind, classifying the receipt as a distasteful but understandable cost of doing business. And it did, for about 48 hours. But the logic of it kept nagging at me. It was too cynical for Marcus. My Marcus, the man who spent an entire weekend building a truly ridiculous treehouse for Leo. My Marcus, who cried during the last scene of It's a Wonderful Life every single year. The man Arthur described a weak, grasping social climber didn't align with the man I had loved for a decade. The disconnect was a splinter in my mind. I couldn't sleep. I found myself staring at him when he wasn't looking, trying to see the man Arthur had described. I saw nothing but my husband. I decided, in a moment of what I told myself was a need for total honesty, to ignore Arthur's advice. I couldn't live in the gray area he had so carefully constructed for me. I had to know the truth. From him. I waited until one evening when we were alone. Leo asleep. The house quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering with a guilt I couldn't explain. "Marcus," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I have to ask you something, and I feel awful about it." He looked up from his laptop, his face open and curious. "What's wrong?" "Liza. When I was tidying your office a while back, I found a receipt. From a jeweler. It was for $15,000, on the same day as that donation you made to Serafina Vance's campaign. I watched him, bracing for the defensiveness, the anger, the stumbled excuses. He stared at me for a beat, and then he laughed. It was not a small, nervous laugh. He threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated exasperation. "Oh, no," he said, rubbing his hand over his face. "You found that god. I am so sorry. You must think." He shook his head. "That jeweler, Eliza. I have been fighting with them for weeks. It's been a total nightmare." I was dumbfounded. Fighting. "What are you talking about?" He sighed, closing his laptop. "Look, it was a clerical error, a massive one. I made the donation, the $15,000. Then, that same week, I bought something. They must have mixed up the accounting, because they charged me twice, once for the donation, and a second, duplicate charge for another $15,000. For the bracelet." My analytical mind clicked. A duplicate charge. It was plausible. It was clean. "I've been on the phone with their head office. I've disputed it with American Express. It's been a mess. I was so angry. I almost just gave up." He must have seen the lingering doubt in my eyes, because his expression softened. He reached for his phone. "Here," he said, his voice void of any defensiveness. "I'll just show you. I think the refund finally posted last week." He tapped the screen a few times, opened his credit card app, and turned the phone toward me. He scrolled down, and there it was. I saw the charge, dated 3 months ago, $15,000, and right below it, dated only last week, was the corresponding credit, a refund, $15,000. The numbers were clear. The data was indisputable. He was telling the truth. He put the phone away, but the look on his face had changed. He looked disappointed, hurt. "The thing is, Liza," he said, his voice quiet, "you just ruined your anniversary present." "What?" "The bracelet," he said, a small, sad smile on his face. "The one they double-charged me for. I bought it for you, for our 10th anniversary. I was going to give it to you today, but I guess the surprise is blown." He stood up and walked into our bedroom. I followed him, my feet feeling heavy. He went to his closet, reached up to the high shelf, and pulled down a long, dark blue velvet box. He walked back to me and just opened it. It was exquisite. A river of perfect square-cut diamonds that caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. It was, without question, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I didn't feel joy. I felt a wave of shame so hot and so sudden it made me dizzy. I had been snooping. I had been suspicious. I had taken his most thoughtful, extravagant gift and turned it into a piece of evidence. I had gone to his father to complain about him. I was a terrible, awful wife. The tears that came were not of relief, but of deep, profound mortification. I started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs. Marcus immediately pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. Hey, shh, it's okay," he murmured, his hand stroking my hair. "It's all okay. Don't cry. I wanted it to be perfect." I clung to him, burying my face in his shirt. "I'm so sorry." I wept. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," he whispered, kissing the top of my head. "Don't worry about it, as long as you like it." He gently fastened the bracelet onto my wrist. It felt as heavy as a shackle. I had been completely, thoroughly, and utterly disarmed. I wore the bracelet for 2 weeks. I wore it every day, a glittering $15,000 badge of my own shame. It was my penance for doubting him, for snooping, for being the suspicious wife. It was a constant, heavy reminder of his generosity and my smallness. I was wearing it when I attended the Denver Tech Initiative Gala, a massive networking event that DataWeave had sponsored. I was back in my element, The VP, a woman in a sharp silk dress, making conversation, analyzing industry trends. I felt powerful, in control. Marcus was at home with Leo. He'd kissed me on his way out for a late client meeting, but I'd felt no suspicion, only a lingering guilt. The keynote speaker for the evening was Councilwoman Serafina Vance. I stood near the back of the ballroom, a glass of untouched champagne in my hand, and I watched her. She was magnetic on stage, all warmth and calculated sincerity, talking about public-private partnerships and a future-forward Denver. She was a gesticulator. She used her hands to emphasize every point, to draw the audience in, and as she raised her right hand to make a definitive point about fiber optic infrastructure, the stage lights hit her wrist, and I saw it. It wasn't a similar bracelet. It wasn't a bracelet in the same style. It was my bracelet. The same square-cut diamonds, the same white gold setting, the same impossible, brilliant fire. My blood didn't run cold. It vanished. I felt hollowed out, a sudden, terrifying vacuum in my chest. I told myself I was wrong. It was a popular design. It was a coincidence. It was a simple, logical explanation. I set my glass down on a passing waiter's tray. I backed away from the crowd, finding a quiet alcove near the exit. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving with the mechanical precision of my job. I wasn't an emotional wife. I was an analyst. I needed data. I pretended to be checking my email while I searched the gala's official hashtag on every social platform. The professional photographers were posting in real time. I found a high-resolution shot of Serafina at the podium, her right arm outstretched. I zoomed in. My screen filled with the bracelet. I compared it to the one on my own wrist. The number of diamonds per link, the construction of the hidden clasp. They were not similar. They were identical. Even then, my mind tried to build a firewall. Maybe he bought one for her, and one for me. A bizarre client gift. But the logic was weak, and it crumbled instantly. My fingers flew again. I wasn't searching the gala hashtag anymore. I was searching for Serafina Vance. I scrolled past the recent articles, the smiling photos from the last 2 weeks. I went back. 1 month, 2 months, 3, and then I stopped. 4 months ago. A Women in Politics fundraiser. The photo was on the society page of a local magazine's website. Serafina was standing at a lectern, accepting an award, and on her wrist, glittering just as brightly as the one on mine, was the bracelet. 4 months ago. This was months before my anniversary gift, months before the clerical error. It was right after the initial $15,000 donation had appeared on our bank statement. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed together with the force of a tectonic collision. The $15,000 donation was a lie. It was a cover story, not for a bribe, but for the first bracelet, the one for her. My discovery of the receipt had sent them into a panic. Arthur's entire gray world speech was a brilliant, calculated diversion. And Marcus, my perfect, loving Marcus. The duplicate charge story was a lie. The refund on his phone, a fake. A simple piece of visual editing for an IT architect. A mock-up, an illusion designed for an audience of one. I looked down at the heavy, cold diamonds encircling my own wrist. This wasn't a gift. It was a prop. It was the price of my silence. It was a copy, bought in a desperate hurry to plaster over the truth I had almost uncovered. Everything, the server crisis, the apologies, the tears of shame, the loving embrace, all of it was a lie, a well-rehearsed, brilliantly executed, and utterly devastating lie. I had been neutralized. I don't remember the drive home from the gala. I must have navigated the streets, used my signal, parked in the garage. I have no memory of it. I was not a wife. I was not a VP. I was a system that had just suffered a catastrophic core-level failure. I was not crying. Crying is for sadness. This was something far past that. This was an eradication. I felt nothing at all, just cold. I walked into the house. It was dark. I went upstairs to our bedroom, and just as I had predicted, Marcus was in bed, his breathing deep and even. He was pretending to be asleep. The man who had gone to a late client meeting was, of course, home early, feigning exhaustion, waiting to see what I would do, what I had discovered. He was a terrible actor. I was the fool for being such a willing audience. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't go to him. I turned and went back downstairs, but I didn't go to the living room. I went to my own home office, the one place in the house that was mine, the one place I had secured. As a data professional, I am paranoid about security. As a mother, I am even more so. I had installed a commercial-grade, cloud-based security system myself 2 years ago, not just on the doors, but in the common areas, the living room, the kitchen, and, because it was the heart of the house, I had a camera with a high-sensitivity microphone in Arthur's study. It was for safety. I'd told myself to keep an eye on Leo when he was with his grandfather. I sat at my desk, the glow of my monitors the only light in the room. I locked the door. I pulled up the security interface, my fingers typing in the 24-character encryption key from muscle memory. I accessed the cloud archive. I didn't search for today's date. I went back, 3 months, to the exact day, the exact hour. I had gone to Arthur's study for help. I found the file. I put on my best headphones and pressed play. I watched myself on the screen. I saw the anguish on my own face, the genuine, desperate confusion as I laid out the problem of the 2 receipts. I listened to my own voice, thin and worried. Then I watched Arthur. I watched his masterpiece of manipulation. I watched his performance of weary sympathy. I heard his voice, so rich and reassuring, tell me I was beautifully naive. I watched him place his hand over mine, his posture the very picture of fatherly protection. I watched him tell me I was the good one and that family first was the only rule. I watched myself leave the room, my shoulders visibly lighter, a look of profound relief on my face. And then I kept watching. I watched Arthur sit in his chair, his benevolent mask still in place, for a full 10 seconds after I was gone. He didn't move. He just stared at the empty doorway. Then, the mask melted. His face hardened into something I had never seen before, a look of cold, reptilian annoyance. He looked around the room, a quick, furtive glance. Then he pulled his personal cell phone from his breast pocket. He stabbed at the screen. He was calling Marcus. The microphone in that camera was designed to pick up a baby's whimper from 50 feet away. It picked up Arthur's voice as if he were sitting next to me. The audio was crystal clear. "Son," he said, his voice no longer the warm, wise rumble of the family patriarch. It was a low, angry hiss. "You have a problem. She knows about the bracelet." He paused, listening. "No, not that bracelet. The receipt. The one from the jeweler." Another pause. "Don't be an idiot," Arthur snapped. "She bought my client gift story. It's fine. For now. But you need to clean this up. You need to clean it up tonight. I want you to go to that jeweler first thing tomorrow. Find an identical one, and have it in your possession. Immediately. Do you understand me? Don't let your stupidity ruin everything we've built." I stopped the recording. My moral compass. My North Star. The moral compass of our family. The man I had trusted over my own husband. He hadn't just known. He hadn't just covered for his son. He was the architect. He was the director. He had written the script that Marcus had performed so flawlessly. The fake credit card statement. The ruined surprise. The tears of shame he had coaxed from me, all of it had been orchestrated by the man in that study. This was the second betrayal, and it was the one that broke me. The affair with Marcus was a simple act of lust and greed. This was a conspiracy. This was a violation so profound, so total, that it rewrote every single memory I had of the last 10 years. The love I thought I had. It wasn't just gone. It had never been real. I sat in the dark of my office for a long time. The wife, Eliza, the one who cried in her husband's arms, the one who felt shame, was gone. She had been erased. In her place sat the vice president of DataWeave Solutions. My systems had been breached. My core data corrupted. I was no longer a partner. I was an analyst with a catastrophic security problem. I did not break. I did not shatter. I did not weep. I solidified. The Arctic chill that had started in the park became my new foundation. I became ice. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to Chloe. She picked up on the first ring, as if she knew. "I'm on my way," she said. "No," I replied, my voice perfectly flat. "Stay where you are. I'm fine. But it's worse than we thought. His father isn't just covering for him. He's in on it. He's directing it." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Eliza." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to work," I said. "I need you to find me an office, a temporary lease, month to month, somewhere anonymous. And I need a team." This was not a job for a simple private investigator sniffing around a hotel. This was a data problem, and I was going to throw the full weight of my resources at it. Only this time, they wouldn't be mine. The next morning, I used my personal private funds, the bonuses I had earned, the stock options I had vested, the money I had kept entirely separate, just in case, and I assembled my arsenal. I didn't just hire a PI. I hired a former federal prosecutor, a forensic accountant who had a reputation for finding ghosts in the machine, and a 3-person cybersecurity team from Tel Aviv that I had once tried to recruit. My alibi was simple and airtight. I called a family dinner. I sat at the table, wearing the copy of the bracelet, and I smiled. I was the perfect supportive wife. I told Marcus and Arthur that DataWeave was holding a mandatory, week-long executive retreat in Boulder. It was a deep dive, I said, for quarterly planning and a new product rollout. No phones allowed during the day, total immersion. They bought it without a second thought. Of course they did. My ambition was the most convenient, reliable part of my cover story. I kissed my son, Leo. Goodbye. This was the hardest part. I arranged for Chloe to pick him up from our house, telling Marcus that she had graciously offered to take him for the week so I could focus. I set up a new, hidden camera in her guest room, one that streamed only to my new, encrypted device. I would not let him out of my sight. My son was safe. My assets were secure. I would not, under any circumstances, leave him with Marcus or Arthur. He was the only clean data in the entire system. I did not go to Boulder. I went to a nondescript office building in Lodo that Chloe had secured. The blinds were drawn. The Wi-Fi was a ghost. For 7 days, we worked. The PI confirmed the hotel stays, the dinners, the timeline. That was the simple, human mess. The forensic accountant and the cyber team found the real story. They found the why. It wasn't just an affair. That was a symptom. A messy human perk. The real disease was money. The accountant found a shell corporation, a simple LLC with a generic name, registered in Wyoming. The listed agent was a lawyer I'd never heard of, but the money flowing into it wasn't from Marcus. It was from Arthur. He was funding it. The cyber team found the breach. Marcus, with his high-level IT credentials, hadn't just been upgrading servers. He had been building a back door. He had used his access, and Serafina had used hers, to gain privileged, non-public access to the Denver City Planning and Zoning Commission's database. The pattern was right there, in clean, terrifying columns of data. Serafina would identify land parcels, old warehouses, forgotten lots, run-down commercial strips that were scheduled for massive municipal rezoning, information that was worth tens of millions. Before the city's intent was made public, Marcus would feed the data to Arthur. Arthur, through his shell company, would buy the properties for pennies on the dollar from unsuspecting owners. Weeks later, the city would announce its new urban renewal project. Serafina would be on television, championing the development, and the value of Arthur's new holdings would skyrocket, not by 10%, but by 1,000. This wasn't an affair. This was a criminal enterprise. It was conspiracy, insider trading, and massive-scale fraud. They weren't just cheating on me. They were robbing the entire city. And I was their alibi. I was the high-powered, respectable VP wife, the ambitious, driven, perfect mother. I was the family in Serafina's family values. I was the granite foundation they had built their entire house of cards on. I wasn't the glue. I was the cover. This was the night, our 10th anniversary. My week of planning in Boulder was over, and I was back. I knew exactly where Marcus was. He was in room 1201 at the Ethelred, not with a client, but with Serafina Vance. My surveillance team had confirmed it an hour ago, and my data, my beautiful, terrible data, told me something else. Senator Grant, her husband, was not at home. He was in the main ballroom of that very same hotel, not 200 feet below them, hosting a $500 a plate fundraiser. The pieces were not just in place, they were stacked on a fault line. All they needed was a tremor. I was parked across the street, in the dark, my own command center. It was time. Step 1. I sent a text message from a burner phone to Arthur. Arthur, help me. Marcus is in room 1201 at the Ethelred. He's trying to cut me out of the land deal. He's meeting Serafina privately to sign papers. I didn't target his love for his son. I targeted his greed. I watched my tracker. His car was moving from his gated community toward downtown in less than 3 minutes. He was furious. Step 2. I sent an anonymous, encrypted email to Senator Grant's chief of staff, whose address I had easily acquired. The subject line read, "Urgent security threat to Senator Grant." The body was simple. "A significant threat to the senator's reputation is currently unfolding in your hotel. Room 1201. You're welcome." I attached a single time-stamped photo from my PI of Serafina entering the elevator. My PI inside the ballroom texted me 1 minute later. "They're moving. The senator and his whole team are heading for the elevators. They are not happy." Step 3. The final piece. I sent a text message to my husband, Marcus, waiting in that hotel room. "Leo is on his way up. He misses his dad so much." I could imagine his panic. The woman he was sleeping with, the wife of a ruthless politician, in his room. And his son was on the way. He would do anything to stop Leo from seeing. He would run. I saw Arthur's black Mercedes screech to a halt at the valet. He threw his keys at the attendant and stormed into the lobby. I followed, keeping to the shadows of the ornate, cavernous room. I took a position behind a large marble pillar. The elevator on the right dinged. The doors opened, and Marcus burst out, his face pale, his tie loose, still fumbling with his suit jacket. He was looking wildly around the lobby for his son. He didn't see Arthur until he was 2 feet away. "What the hell are you doing?" Arthur hissed, his face purple with rage. "You're cutting me out. You're signing papers without me. You ungrateful—" "Dad," Marcus stammered, his eyes wide. What are you doing here?" And right at that moment, the central bank of elevators chimed. Ding! The polished brass doors slid open. Senator Grant stepped out, flanked by 2 stone-faced security men and his chief of staff. He saw Marcus and Arthur, 2 men he knew, standing there, agitated. He started to walk toward them, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. It was the most beautiful moment of all, because that is when I executed step 4. My son, Leo, who I had been holding hands with just outside the door, ran into the lobby. I had given a valet $20 and a simple instruction. Just point him toward the elevators when I nod. Leo, pure and innocent and perfect, ran across the marble floor, waving a small stuffed dinosaur. "Daddy," he shouted, his voice echoing in the sudden, terrible silence. "Daddy, I came to see your new hotel." Marcus's face didn't just go pale, it turned white, the color of bone. He was frozen, trapped. He looked from his furious father to the powerful, suspicious husband of his mistress, and finally to his beautiful, smiling 6-year-old son. That was my cue. I stepped out from behind the pillar, my phone held up, the camera's red light glowing. My voice was calm, pleasant, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hello, Marcus. Hello, Arthur. Senator, I believe you all know each other." I smiled, walking toward my son. "I'm just here to pick up my son. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know where you are listening from in the comments below so we can share our thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.